welcome to our deep dive into the Surangama Sutra.
Okay.
You've given us a translation of the sutra itself, along with commentary by Master Han Shan and Lu Kuan Yu, who did the translation.
Yeah.
This sutra is a cornerstone of Mahayana Buddhism.
Absolutely.
Especially the Zen tradition.
Yeah.
And it grapples with some big questions.
And does.
The nature of mind, the path to enlightenment, even how the universe came to be.
And what's striking is that the Surangama Sutra isn't just an ancient text.
Right.
It's a living guide.
I see.
Buddhists still study its insights into the mind and the path to enlightenment today.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And it offers a perspective on creation.
Yes.
That's quite different from what you might be used to instead of a divine creator.
Okay.
It suggests that everything arises from the mind itself.
Interesting.
The sutra states, the mind, when stirred by the first thought, creates the basic illusion of an ego.
And splits the whole into subject and object.
Right.
So our very first thought creates this separation.
Yes.
That's a pretty radical idea.
It is.
I like it.
Imagine a perfectly clear mirror.
Okay.
That's the great mirror wisdom. Reflecting everything without distortion.
Yeah.
But when that first thought arises, it's like a ripple disturbing the surface.
I see.
Creating the illusion of a separate self.
I'm trying to picture that ripple effect.
Yeah.
Does that mean we're living in a distorted reality?
That's a good question.
The sutra also dives into the six consciousnesses.
Yes.
With a special focus on the sixth and seventh.
Right.
And it even says that the seventh consciousness is unreal.
Interesting.
Can you help unpack that for me and for our listener?
Think of the sixth consciousness as your thinking mind, always analyzing and judging.
Yeah.
The seventh is subtler.
Okay.
It's that sense of I.
Gotcha, that underlies your thoughts. The one clinging to a separate self.
Right.
The sutra, saying the seventh is unreal, is a direct challenge to how we usually see the world. What if this I we hold on to so tightly is an illusion?
I see.
What would that mean?
Oh, wow.
For how we live our lives?
That's a huge question.
It is.
If even our sense of self is an illusion, where does that leave us?
That's what the sutra's trying to explore.
Yeah. Is this where the concept of inverted perception comes in?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The sutra uses the example of Ananda, one of the Buddha's disciples, observing the Buddha opening and closing his hand.
Interesting.
Ananda perceives movement, but the Buddha points out that it's Ananda's seeing that's moving,
I see.
not the hand itself.
That's how
Our perception is what shifts, not reality.
That's a tricky concept to grasp.
It is.
The sutra also compares this to a story about King Vimalakirti talking about how everything changes, using the Ganges River as an example.
Okay.
The Buddha asks him if his seeing of the river has aged along with him.
And of course, the king realizes his faculty of seeing hasn't aged, even though his body has.
That makes sense.
This highlights the difference between changing phenomena and the unchanging nature of true perception.
I see.
The river changes.
Yeah.
But the essence of our seeing remains the same.
So the sutra is saying that reality itself might be unchanging.
Exactly.
It's our perception that creates the illusion of change.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see how this idea of inverted perception is so central to the sutra's message.
It is a key concept.
But then the sutra throws in another curveball, saying that both delusion and enlightenment come from the same source.
Interesting.
How can that be possible?
That's where it gets really fascinating.
All right.
The sutra offers the analogy of a person with an inflamed eye seeing a halo around a lamp.
Gotcha.
The halo isn't real. It's a distortion. But the light itself is.
Okay.
Could it be that our individual karma acts like that inflamed eye,
I see,
distorting our perception of a deeper reality?
So the light represents our true nature, and the halo represents the distortion caused by our karma.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But it also raises a lot of questions.
It does.
What does this deeper reality actually look like?
The sutra offers a glimpse into that deeper reality when it talks about the Tathagata store, a concept that can be difficult to grasp.
Okay.
It's described as the ultimate reality, encompassing both the tangible and the intangible,
Great.
going beyond our usual ways of thinking.
I can see why that's hard to wrap our heads around.
Yeah.
The sutra uses these vivid analogies. A void inside a pitcher.
Right.
Dancing flowers in an empty sky. Water endlessly cascading over a waterfall.
Those are good ones.
Do these analogies help make the Tathagata story more understandable for you?
They do.
And what about for our listener out there?
Yeah.
Do any of these images resonate with you?
The analogies are powerful because they point to something beyond our limited concepts.
Right.
For instance,
yeah.
Think about the void inside a pitcher.
Okay.
It's not simply nothingness. It's a space full of potential for something to arise.
So the pitcher itself is like our limited perception, and the void inside is the vast potential of the Tathagata story.
That's a good way to think about it.
That's a helpful way to think about it.
Yeah.
The sutra also talks about the 6 entrances, which are our senses.
Yes.
Sight, hearing.
Smell, taste, touch, your mind.
A mind.
How do our senses fit into all of this? The 6 entrances are how we experience the world.
Okay.
But the sutra suggests that we're not just passively observing.
Right.
We're actively creating our reality.
Interesting.
Through these senses. And this is where the sutra's unique perspective on the 7 elements comes into play. It includes consciousness and perception.
Gotcha.
Alongside the traditional 5 elements.
Okay.
Earth, water, fire, wind, and space.
So consciousness and perception are just as fundamental to reality as the physical world.
That's what the sutra is suggesting.
That challenges the way we typically think about things.
It does.
I remember the sutra giving those examples, like closing your ears and suddenly hearing sounds, or holding your breath and feeling cold.
Exactly.
So those are weird.
These experiences show how the 7 elements arise from the Tathagata story and intertwine to shape our reality.
I see.
It's all interconnected in a way that we might not always be aware of.
We're constantly creating our reality.
In a sense.
Through all these different inputs.
Yes.
The sutra also delves into the concept of the 6 planes of existence.
Right.
Now, this is where things start to feel a bit more like what we traditionally think of as heaven and hell, right?
Yeah. It's easy to fall into that trap.
Okay.
But the sutra presents these planes differently.
I see.
It's not about some far-off afterlife.
Gotcha.
It's about understanding different states of being that we can experience right here and now based on our actions and intentions.
So it's more psychological than physical.
Precisely.
Okay.
These planes are reflections of our current state of mind shaped by our karma.
Yes.
Those actions and intentions
I'm with you.
we keep talking about.
The sutra doesn't shy away from vivid descriptions, though.
It doesn't.
We have devas in celestial realms.
Right.
Experiencing bliss. Yeah.
But also the hells.
Yes.
Full of unimaginable suffering.
That contrast highlights.
What's the purpose of these contrasting descriptions?
The vast spectrum of experience that's possible depending on the path we choose to walk.
And even the devas, who seem to have it all, aren't truly free from suffering.
No, they're not.
What's the sutra getting at there?
Even in those heavenly realms, there's still attachment to pleasure, to a sense of self, to the idea that things are permanent.
I see.
And attachment ultimately leads to suffering.
Gotcha.
Because everything is impermanent.
So even the devas are caught in the illusion of a separate self.
They are.
Just like us.
Yes, they haven't yet realized that true freedom comes from seeing beyond those temporary states of being, from recognizing that unchanging essence that the sutra points to.
The sutra categorizes devas into 10 types.
It does.
Devas of form and formlessness.
Yes.
Devas who love to create. Devas consumed by pride.
Right.
What's the significance of all these different types?
Those categories demonstrate the many ways we can become attached to specific states of existence.
Gotcha.
Consider those devas who delight in creating. Perhaps they represent those who are driven by a desire to control the world around them.
So they might feel a temporary satisfaction from that creative power.
Yeah.
But it's still an attachment that binds them.
Exactly.
Okay.
The sutra is showing us that no matter what we're attached to, pleasure, power, even knowledge, it ultimately prevents us from seeing reality as it truly is.
So what about the descriptions of the hells?
Okay.
Are those purely meant to scare us into being good?
Well, the descriptions of the hells are certainly sobering.
Vividly portraying the intense suffering that arises from acting out of greed, hatred, and delusion.
Okay.
They're a reminder that actions have consequences.
8 hot hells.
Yes.
8 cold hells, each with its own unique torments.
That's right.
The sutra goes into quite a bit of detail about what happens in those realms.
Yeah.
It's pretty intense.
Well, while the imagery is vivid, it's important to remember that the sutra is using these descriptions symbolically to represent the inner states of torment that we create for ourselves when we allow negativity to rule our actions.
So the suffering isn't imposed by some external force.
No.
It's a natural consequence of our choices.
Precisely.
Wow.
We are, as the sutra emphasizes, the architects of our own reality.
I like that.
Our actions create suffering.
Okay.
But they also have the power to create happiness and liberation. The choice is ours.
It all comes back to choice.
It does.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
If the hells represent inner states of suffering,
what
about the other realms?
Okay.
Are those also symbolic?
The sutra describes a spectrum of realms, including the realm of hungry ghosts, the animal realm, and of course the human realm. These realms can be seen as both symbolic and literal.
For example, hungry ghosts are described as having huge bellies and tiny mouths, constantly tormented by hunger and thirst.
That's a powerful image of insatiable craving, a state of mind that always wants more and never feels satisfied. And we can see this reflected in our own lives, can't we?
Definitely.
The way we get caught up in desires for material possessions, recognition, or approval.
It's not just about literal hunger then.
It's not.
It's about a deeper kind of emptiness that can't be filled by external things.
Exactly.
Wow.
And that emptiness leads to suffering.
Okay.
Whether we're a hungry ghost or a human lost in a cycle of craving.
Then there's the animal realm. Where beings are driven by instinct and lack the capacity for higher reasoning.
The animal realm can symbolize a mind dominated by impulses and desires, a state of limited awareness. It's about getting stuck in repetitive patterns of behavior without conscious thought.
So we can get trapped in our own animal realm, simply reacting to things without awareness.
I know, I've been there.
We all have.
What about the human realm, where we find ourselves now?
The sutra doesn't sugarcoat the human experience. It acknowledges the inherent suffering, illness, old age, death, emotional turmoil.
All the fun stuff.
But it also highlights that being human is a precious opportunity.
I like that.
It's in this realm.
That we can awaken to our true nature and break free from that cycle of suffering.
So we're at a crossroads. We can remain trapped in those lower realms, or we can choose to cultivate the qualities that lead to liberation.
The sutra provides a roadmap for that journey.
That sounds helpful.
Guiding us towards a state of being free from suffering and full of wisdom and compassion.
That's an inspiring message.
It is.
It's not about escaping the world. It's about transforming ourselves so we can bring more peace and understanding to it.
Exactly.
That transformation is a big undertaking.
It is.
It makes me think about that line from the sutra.
Okay.
The true nature of reality is pure and undefiled, like a perfectly clear mirror. It's our own minds that create the distortions, the illusions that lead to suffering.
It's as if we're covering our own inherent clarity with layers of delusion, smudging up that perfect mirror with our fingerprints.
That's a great way to put it. And the sutra uses the term inverted perception to describe this process. It's like we're looking at the world upside down, mistaking our own projections for reality.
That's the idea.
It goes on to explain how this inversion happens, tracing it all the way back to the first thought that pops into our minds.
Interesting.
That's a pretty radical idea.
It is. It challenges our usual way of thinking.
Can you help break that down?
Sure.
For our listener and me.
It all begins with that fundamental awareness that's the source of everything, what the sutra calls bodhi, or enlightened mind. This awareness is pure and undifferentiated, like a vast empty space full of potential.
So at this point, there's no sense of self.
Exactly. It's pure potentiality.
I see.
But then that first thought arises, and with it, the illusion of a separate self is born. That's the ripple in the mirror we were talking about earlier.
Our own thinking is what creates the sense of I and other.
Yes.
Of subject and object.
Precisely.
It's not inherent to reality itself.
That's what the sutra is suggesting.
The sutra describes this process as dimness arising, creating dull emptiness. Right. What do those terms represent?
That dimness is the clouding of our pure awareness.
Right.
It's that moment when we lose sight of our true nature.
Okay.
And fixate on this illusory self. Mm-hmm. The dull emptiness is what we then project onto the world around us.
I see.
Perceiving it as separate from ourselves and devoid of inherent meaning. So we've created this void, this sense of separation, and now we're desperately trying to fill it.
It makes me think about how we constantly seek fulfillment in external things.
Exactly.
Possessions, relationships, achievement. Are we just trying to fill a hole?
That's the heart of it.
That we ourselves created.
It's a futile attempt to fill a void with things that are ultimately impermanent.
The sutra then describes how this dimness and emptiness unite with the darkness to become form. That's where the physical world as we know it comes into being. So the darkness represents ignorance, the misunderstanding of our true nature.
Exactly.
And when that combines with our sense of separation, it gives rise to our perception of form, the physical world we experience through our senses.
We're not just talking about physical objects here.
Okay.
It's about how we perceive and conceptualize everything.
I see.
This process shapes how we see and interact with the world.
So
the sutra is suggesting that our minds actively create the reality we experience. That's a huge shift in perspective.
It makes you wonder.
It does.
How much of what we perceive as real is just a projection of our own minds?
That's a question the sutra invites us to contemplate.
The sutra also talks about the 6 coarser conditions of unenlightenment.
Right.
What are those?
Think of these conditions as the ways we perpetuate our own suffering. They include things like knowledge.
So knowledge can actually be a trap.
It can be if we become attached to specific views or ideas.
I never thought of it that way.
Clinging to them is the absolute truth.
Okay.
Responsiveness refers to our reactions to sensory input, which often lead to craving what we like and pushing away what we don't.
And attachment, of course, is the glue that binds us to things, making us believe that our happiness depends on them.
It's like we're building our own prisons.
And the act of naming things further solidifies that illusion of separation, creating a world of distinct entities. Instead of recognizing the interconnectedness of everything.
And from those attachments and perceptions arise karmic activity, actions driven by our deluded views.
And those actions, of course, generate more suffering, both for ourselves and for others.
It's a cycle that feeds itself until we wake up to the true nature of reality.
But the sutra doesn't just describe the problem.
No, it doesn't.
It offers a solution.
That's right.
It emphasizes meditation as a path to liberation, a way to break free from this cycle.
Right. The sutra outlines various meditation practices designed to cut through those illusions of inverted perception and help us realize our true nature.
What are some of the specific practices the sutra recommends?
One practice involves focusing on the element of water.
Water?
Water is a potent symbol of fluidity and adaptability. By contemplating its qualities, we can learn to let go of rigid attachments and flow with the ever-changing nature of reality.
The sutra describes water as both pure and impure.
Yes.
Life-giving and destructive.
Yeah. It highlights how we tend to categorize things.
What can we learn from contemplating?
As good or bad.
Okay.
Desirable or undesirable.
Those seemingly contradictory qualities.
But the sutra reminds us that these categories are ultimately arbitrary, just projections of our own minds. The practice isn't about clinging to the good aspects of water and rejecting the bad. It's about seeing beyond those categories altogether.
So it's about recognizing a deeper unity that transcends our limited perceptions.
That's the idea.
Are there other practices the sutra recommends?
Another powerful practice is called turning the hearing back to its source.
Turning the hearing back to its source.
This involves shifting our attention from the external sounds we hear to the faculty of hearing itself.
So instead of getting lost in the content of what we're hearing, we focus on the act of hearing itself.
Exactly.
What's the benefit of that?
By turning our attention inward, we could start to disengage from that endless stream of thoughts and perceptions that keep us distracted from our true nature.
Right.
It's like tuning out the noise of the world to listen to the silence within.
That's a beautiful image.
And in that silence, perhaps we can start to experience the peace and clarity that the sutra points towards.
The sutra also stresses the importance of understanding the Tathagata store. Can you remind us what that is and why it's so significant?
The Tathagata store is the sutra's term for ultimate reality, the source from which all phenomena arise.
Right.
It's often described as a vast treasury containing all possibilities, both manifest and unmanifest.
Right.
It's both empty and full, transcendent and immanent.
The sutra uses several analogies to describe it, like the void in a pitcher, or dancing flowers appearing in an empty sky.
What can we learn from those analogies?
I like those.
Those analogies help us grasp the paradoxical nature of ultimate reality. It's the ground of being from which everything arises. And it's also the very nature of every single thing. We are, in essence, inseparable from this Tathagata store.
It's always there.
It is.
Our deluded perceptions simply prevent us from recognizing this truth.
So enlightenment isn't about attaining something we lack.
Right.
It's about removing the obstacles that prevent us from seeing what's already present.
That's a profound insight.
It is.
This has been an incredible journey.
I agree.
Through the teachings of the Surangama Sutra.
It's a rich and complex text.
It's a text that challenges us, expands our awareness, and offers a path to liberation.
What's one final thought?
What's one final thought you'd like to leave our listener with?
The sutra offers a powerful message of hope. It reminds us that no matter how lost we feel in delusion, the potential for awakening is always present within us.
I like that.
The path may be challenging, but the rewards are immeasurable.
That's a wonderful note to end on.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the Surangama Sutra.
It's been a pleasure.
We encourage you to explore this extraordinary text further and discover its wisdom for yourself.